Hi all, very excited to welcome you all to my session in, on JavaScript promises. Okay, so my agenda for this session will be why promises, what is promise, and I will be explaining it promise with a simple example. And after that, we will be seeing about promise chain, how to do a promise chain with an example. Okay. So to our first question, why promises? So why promises? Promise came into existence because to solve the problems which callbacks were facing, overcome the problems in callbacks such as callback hill. That was the primary reason. And other reason for promises, JavaScript is single threaded and you need some way to handle the our things asynchronously, our processes asynchronously. That was the eventual reason for promises. I have explained it very elaborately in my session on callbacks. So I will advise you to see that session first before coming to promises so that you understand how promises overcame the problems in callback. Okay. So this is why promises came, and so coming to our core thing. So what is a promise? Promise is a way to as callback was came into existence for handling asynchronous. Similarly, promises also came into existence for handling asynchronous operation asynchronously in JavaScript. That is the first thing. Second thing is, if you take promise, promise is basically a proxy for a value that is not necessarily known when the promise is created. And the third thing you need to understand, the promise name, right? It is like a you are making to the JavaScript engine a promise that I don't have the value now, but I will eventually get a value. And the fourth thing what promises does is it associates handlers with success or failure. Okay, I will. We will come back to this slide once we see a simple example. I think that will make things clear for you. Okay, now going to a simple example. Let me create a promise promise object here. So for creating the promise object, you need to do it as a constructor. Okay, new promise. The promise, do I need to import the promise anywhere from any package, or do I need to install any package? It is not needed because it is already built into JavaScript from es6. Before that, you need to do it from jQuery or Dojo from third-party packages. But from es6 is already available, so you need not do that. Okay, but if you are going for IE old browsers, you may need to do it from a third-party thing. Okay, the new promise will take a callback function as a parameter. Okay, let me create a callback function here. Callback function. Okay, so the callback function of a promise will receive two values. Okay, from the promise. Okay, first will be the resolve function and the reject function. Okay, the first parameter will be a resolve function and second will be a reject function. So whatever we asynchronous function we write here is supposed to call either of resolve or reject based on the output. Okay, if the asynchronous function resolved, you was successful, you can call the resolve function. If it has failed, we can call the reject function. Okay. So right here we are supposed to write our asynchronous function, which we don't know when it will return, like set timeout or any HTTP call. So for better understanding, let me write a set timeout function here. Okay. So I will make it to print something after a particular timeout. Okay. Let me say set timeout completed something. Okay. Set timeout completed. Maybe I will also show you reject, but let me first do resolve. So let me have it as success. I will pass success from here. Okay. And I will pass, and the set timeout function is also supposed to send a value, the time after which it is supposed to execute. Okay. Let me add this callback function here. Okay. Now what the new promise will return? New promise, as you know, new promise will return a promise object. Okay. It will return a promise object. Okay. The promise object, right, will be always in one of the three states. Either it will be in pending, fulfilled, or rejected. Okay. At first, it will be in pending state because it has not received this value. The value is success. Here in this case, it is success. It will not, would have not, when this executes, it will not have received that value. Okay, if I console log the promise object here, you can see that the promise object at first it will be in the promise state. I will try to print the promise state, and I will print promise object here. Okay, at first this state will be pending because this would not have resolved. Okay, this would not have resolved because since it is a asynchronous function, and this promise will not wait for it to complete. As you know, JavaScript will not never wait for a asynchronous function to complete. It will just call that function and continue with its execution. Similarly, here the promise will not wait for it to complete. It will just call the setTimeout, which is a browser API function. It will just call the browser API with the callback and it will return. Okay, it will not wait, as you know in case of JavaScript. So when this gets executed, the promise object will not have a value. It will not have it will not got a resolve or reject would not have got called, and it will not get a value. So the promise object value at first will be pending. If I try to execute now, you will see that. So it will just say pending. Let me save it, execute it again. You're seeing now promise is in this case is at first it is in pending state. Only when that set timeout gets called and resolved is called, it will move to fulfilled. But if you call reject, it would have moved to rejected. Okay. So let me. So other thing you need to understand is this is a. It is like a synchronous function. It will return. It will execute what all asynchronous function it has and return. Okay. This acts as if it is a synchronous function. So that's why after this only this gets executed. Okay, it is you should not treat this as a asynchronous function. Okay, it acts as if it is a synchronous function. It will just return, though this it does not have a value. This is what I told you. Promise is like a promise to the JavaScript engine that It does not have the value right now, but eventually it will receive the value. Okay. Now come into the phase where we handle the event. Okay, if it is a success, I want to call a particular function. If it is a failure, I want to call a particular event, as we saw in this slide, right? What we saw, that it allows you to associate handlers with asynchronous action, that is success or failure. So now let us associate handlers. Okay, how we will associate handlers? By calling then on the promise object what new promise returned. Okay, so the first callback we are passing to then will be the success, will be for success. The second callback will be for failure. So you can also receive the value from the resolve and reject. Here I am passing the value success, so you can receive the data here, and I can also console log. So I can say success, value received, and here the value received will be success. Okay. Similar case for failure, you can have something called error, and you can say that failure value received something. Okay. Though now the failure will not get called because we are resolving it. Okay. Now we have associated handlers. Now if you try to print, this would get called. This is a asynchronous. Okay, this is not synchronous. If you have something after this, right? If you have something console log hello one, something you have. Excuse, sorry for that. Okay. If you have a thing here, this will get executed only after this execution because this is asynchronous. So only after all the synchronous happens, asynchronous will get happen. Okay. If you try to, I will just save it and try to execute. So now you are able to see the hello 11 is getting printed. Only after that we are getting this printed. The success value received is getting printed. Okay. Let me have it execute another time. So hello 11 is executed, then only the asynchronous part is getting executed. So this success value we are receiving. Set timeout completed is coming from here. Okay. After that, after that we solve. So this asynchronous gets executed. So to reiterate, this is a synchronous part. You have to think this as a synchronous part and this as a asynchronous part in promise. Okay. And now I have resolved. You can also try to reject it. If you try to reject this with a failure, this will get called. What will get called is this. Now this one will get called. Okay, let me save it and execute it. So it is saying data is not defined. Sorry for that error. We'll change it as error. So now you are able to see, now we are getting a failure instead of a success because we have rejected. You can also imagine in here you can also have a HTTP call instead of set timeout as well. Here you are supposed to put all your asynchronous function, okay, and here you need to add all the handlers, okay. When the asynchronous is a success, what I need to do? If it is a failure, what I need to do? Maybe if you think it as a, if you have a username password you're sending to the server, you can have the HTTP here. If it is success, username password is correct, you can make it login, move to the home page. If it is a failure, you can say that user not authenticated. You can set that error in the login page in the failure. Okay, hope you understood. Now, if we move back to that slide, I think you may better understand. Okay, if I will go back to this slide. So this is what I told. So promise is a proxy for a value. The object is a proxy for a value, not necessarily known when the promise is created. So when the new promise is created, we don't know the value. That's what it is saying. Meaning by it is a proxy for a value. And as the third point, as the name suggests, you are promising to the JavaScript engine that I don't know the value now. I'm still in pending, but eventually I will get the value when that gets resolved. So only when the promise got resolved, you are getting value, right? I said only when it is getting resolved, success from timeout, you are getting a value. So that's what it means here. So, and the other thing promise makes you do is it allows you to associate handlers. When the promise object changes state, you are associating handlers. For a success, what function needs to get called? For failure, what function needs to get called? Okay. And after this, we will see a promise chain. Okay. So the promise chain is like you can put then. That's what I mean here. So once this promise object finishes, okay, gets resolved, then this promise object will get called. So you can associate a chain, okay, as I have done here. New promise, okay. After that, when this gets resolved, I am saying that you create another promise. You are seeing here, right? And over this, you can add another promise. So in promise, you can easily add chain as a chain. Once this completes, you can do another thing. Once this completes, when it gets resolved or rejected, you can easily do. But when you take this similar case in case of callback, you will end up with callback hell. Okay. If you try to do the same with callback, you may end up with callback hell. This has been properly averted in case of promises. Okay. So if you this in the same in case of callback, you will see it more confused and maintainability will go for a toss, and errors are also hard to handle in case of callback. This is what it means by callback hell. This has been properly averted in when you use promise chains. Okay. The third one is the takeaways from promises. So what we saw was why promise came into existence. Because due to problems in callback, to overcome the problems in callback, we have promises. By means of promise, we were able to properly handle the failure cases properly, because through then and the second callback, we were able to handle the failure cases properly, and we were also able to change the promises. And even in promises, we have certain drawbacks like we can use promise only once. Once it is resolved or rejected, it is completed. You can't use it another time. Okay, and you can send only a single value. You can't send multiple values. And this restrictions in promises led to observables. Okay, so that's how we have gone into observables right now. So in Angular, you will be seeing more about observables. I will also add a link for observables with this. Okay. Hope you understood. Kindly subscribe so that you can get my updates on my videos. And I will be posting videos at least twice per week. Thank you guys. Have a nice day.